So let's start with the main event. Max Holloway defeats Conor McGregor at 109 of round number 1. Literally on the first strike, really, that he attempted in the entire fight. It happened to be a kick, but the first strike, he plants on he's obviously southpaw. He plants on his right leg. It's like a jumping switch kick, and then he jumps, switches, and I think maybe it was a scissors kick, and then lands on the right to bring himself down, and it kind of buckles. And looked like in real time, it looked like he kind of knee slid and maybe lost his balance, but didn't hurt himself. But then, he tried it again, and I think the whole thing was fucked up, and then he got taken to the ground, or he fell to the ground. Holloway gets on top and is landing like really almost unobstructed ground and pound. He eventually gets back to the feet and he's limping, and then referee Mike Beltran just waves it at 69 seconds of the fight. An absolute calamity for Conor McGregor. Let me tell you what last night represented for him. The idea that people won't pay big money to see him again is 1 billion% false. Understand, and I made this point on this channel many times, but it really is important to keep in mind, passion and fandom in ways that show up materially particularly at the box office in combat sports, these things die hard. They die very slowly. They die hard. To that end, Kimbo Slice, it turned out, was literally on death's door when he was in Bellator, and he remains to this day the highest rated. Let's say it outright. Kimbo Slice is the biggest star Bellator's ever had, and the real peak of Kimbo Slice came long before that. He was on quite literally death's door during that time, and he's still the biggest by a million miles. Like the popularity that he maintained over time, was it as big as his prime? No, but it was still pretty damn big. And obviously, Kimbo Slice did not have even a fraction of the decorated career that Conor McGregor has, for the most part, had. If Conor McGregor comes back in 2027 to compete, it will be big. Will it be this big? I don't know, but it will still be very big. And surely, if he boxes in BKFC, that's going to do record numbers for them. And I'd also maintain that if he ends up, let's say, boxing Jake Paul on Netflix, it is absolutely insane to think that that's not going to draw a significant number. How big? I don't know. We'll have to sort of see at the time. I'm just trying to point out the idea of him as a box office attraction just evaporating overnight. No, that's really not going to happen. But what I can say happened last night was an extinguishment of the flame of the Mystic Mac identity. That is gone. And that is never coming back. The whole idea that a guy can just manufacture magic, the whole idea that a guy can just call his shots and make it happen, like that hot run he was on, through Poirier and through Mendez and through all those guys. The idea that you could recreate that and maintain that kind of, that spirit, that flame. No, you can. I mean, yes, he did it for a while, but like, if there was the lingering hope, I think, by McGregor supporters and maybe even just to a degree casual fans alike. Although there's going to be obviously some split on that. We'll talk about that in a minute. But, there's certainly a sizable portion of the population, let's say, who watches fights and watched this fight that wanted to see if there was still a little McGregor magic left. There is not. It is gone. It is affirmatively completely gone. Again, one more time, that's not to say he can't be, and I'm absolutely certain he will continue to be a box office attraction, nor is it a claim that he can't win fights, particularly if he goes to boxing where the integrity of his knees and perhaps other orthopedic concerns are not, they still could be relevant in boxing, certainly, but they're not going to be as relevant in boxing as they are in, a grappling or wrestling or even, leaving your feet kind of based sport like MMA. So this is not like, he'll never win again, he'll never be popular again. No, he definitely will continue to be popular, and he will certainly, I should say, there's a decent likelihood he could win again, depending on how things go. But the idea that someone can just be electric on command, the idea that somebody can just do something so special and just conjure it up like some, necromancer or something, like, no, that is completely, utterly finished. Gone. If those hot streaks that you see in combat sports like that. I mean, somebody, like Habib can have an undefeated record, or even St. Pierre, he had losses along the way, but he would have long winning streaks. But dude, look at some of those fights. Like he crawled out of those fights on his hands and knees sometimes. In particular, the Johnny Hendricks fight. And I realize there's asterisks around that, pre-USADA, but you get my point. Like they don't just go in there and just have magic. Sometimes they have magic, and then accumulatively they can do something really profoundly special. But just doing, unexpected, shocking, amazing things like that, and doing them in succession, or just being able to come back out of that and return to that kind of a rhythm when you look like, you're 10 years older than you actually are, dude, it's over. It is over. It is affirmatively, absolutely. It was probably over before last night, but last night was the absolute coffin nails in that idea. That guy is at one. You will see him again. He may win again. He may do big box office ratings again or numbers. That guy is never walking through the door again. It'll never happen. It cannot happen. He'll be 38 in 2 days. Right? He'll be 38 in 2 days. He looked to me not out of shape per se, because like Rob Whittaker looked to me like a little heavy. Obviously, it's a different scenario. Connor was going, I guess, up a weight class too, depending on how you want to define the terms of time. But Whittaker was going up to 205 for the first time, 20-pound jump. He looked a little doughy, even though he got the job done. And I thought in the end, not too badly. But, Connor looked reasonably in shape in that way, but he didn't look like he had the same kind of fluidity of movement. His face looks puffy. His hair looks noticeably a little bit thinner. There's like the amount of just aging that naturally has occurred, obviously, but then how that's been magnified by the way in which he's been living, and it was just so on display. It was immediately visible. I mean, guys, like, you are where you are in life with aging, and this is something I know a lot of young men don't really appreciate. Certainly, when I was a young guy, I didn't really appreciate this, but like, yes, you can be an in shape person at 37, of course. And sometimes if you are really, really good about it, you can have great success in sports, professional sports, late into your 30s, but you just can't do what he's done, especially with all the other issues he had even during his prime with injury durability. You recall he went into the Mendez fight with really, really messed up knee, among a number of other things. Live the way he's been living, and then just expect that your body and your integrity is going to your tools of the trade are just not going to be rusted and weathered and lesser than. He looked diminished to me, bigger as a 170er than a 55er, or certainly a 45er, but greatly, greatly, greatly diminished. And more to that point, like, he didn't look to me like he had any kind of fire within his belly either. I know he was talking about that at the press conference, but then you just look at his body and his energy. Like, that's what I mean, dude. You are where you are in life. And sometimes these powers of biology overtake you by surprise or bring you to a place you never expected, and you can't really fake your way out of it. Like, people all the time, like, they call me Unc and I got gray hair. I am where I am, and I'm not really trying to fight it. Like, I had my turn to be in my 20s. I had my turn to be in my 30s. I am where I am. You cannot fight this. There's a certain degree of just kind of acceptance along that. And then that recognition also has to be informing what decisions you make with your life. Like, he honestly shouldn't even be fighting. Like, he made enough money before through 2017 to like not have to do any of this shit again. And yet here he is. There was, to me, it's seemingly a lack of recognition about him understanding where he is in life and what place he has arrived and what he's done to do it. There are questions about whether or not he was injured before he ever got to the octagon. To that end, Connor denies it. You can go on his social media vociferously. Oscar Willis, a friend of MK, said he had seen Connor train all week or something, or for quite some time, and that there was just no indication there was a problem. You can look at the warm-up footage of the back room before getting going, and it didn't look amiss to me. I realize that there is a question of how he just appeared emotionally lesser than walking out and then taking off his shoes. It looked like he was stumbling. But if you watch that video, it's the other knee that looks like he gets a little hurt, not the one that actually got hurt, which was his right knee. So I don't know if he had a pre-existing injury. There's a lot of rumor mongering, but that doesn't seem to me, as of the time of this video that I'm making it now, that does not appear to me to be the strongest argument. The strongest argument is that this guy already had injury problems before any of his departure time really took place. Since then has lived insanely hard. And New York Times reporting that not only did he take HGH and anabolic steroids to get over the leg injury, but then took it for some time after, because according to their reporting, like the way that it made him feel, that's what they reported. To add on, God only knows what the drug use has done to his body more generally. I mean, I want you to think about something. Think about how many, and I'm not being facetious with this. Think about how many hangovers this guy has powered through. Like, and what this does to your organs, what this does to your brain, what this does to your connective tissue over time, to say nothing of what the anabolic steroids and the HGH could, again, according to New York Times reporting anyway, what that all does to the integrity of connective tissue, and moreover, just your ability for your body to function properly. Like, there is a bill in life due if you wish to live that way. And that bill just came due. Yeah, you can say it's dumb luck, or whatever, misfortune, however you wish to describe it. The first one that he threw. Yeah, dude, the first one that he threw. He looked to me for the first time truly old and enfeebled. That's what he looked like to me. He looked fucking old. As an old dude, I welcome to the club, fella. Like, you're old now. You're fucking old now. And you just can't do what you used to do, particularly with that amount of time off, particularly coming off catastrophic injury, particularly with, again, according to the New York Times reporting, anabolic drug use and HGH, to say nothing of what the drugs of recreation have done, to say nothing of how much, again, we're talking about the margin of error with your athletic preparation being so important. All the times he's probably fucked up his sleep and done God only knows what, drinking all night, and to say, among other things, powering through all that. How could you possibly think you're going to arrive at 38 years of age, get in the octagon and try something like that and not realize that's an enormous risk factor? He is old and broken now. He had one injury on his left leg, and now he's got an injury on his right. And I think he had the previous one, obviously, when he tore his ACL, remember, against Max. And then he had the fucked up knee injury against Mendez and a million other things. The pinky toe that pulled him out of the Chandler fight, although that's sort of more relatively recent. But he's had a whole host of problems. You're going to add all of that, plus all that time off, plus all that injury, the breaking of the shin bone, and then, all the things we've mentioned, and you're going to go out there and just assume your body's going to respond, to say nothing of the fact that, again, he didn't even seem to have the same emotional, what's the word I'm looking for? Connectivity to the moment. All of that seemed gone. Mystic Mac is never, ever, ever walking through that door. If you want to see him, you need to fire up Fight Pass. That's the only place that's ever going to live. That or your memory. It cannot happen. He has been injury prone for years, and it looks to me like dude, literally, this guy has, in those last two fights, I guess he didn't have to get stretchered out this time, but has had to get the fight ended due to, at a bare minimum, significant orthopedic injury. I would call the one that happened the previous time in the third Poirier fight, I would just call that straight up catastrophic. That was a catastrophic injury. This one is not catastrophic in the same way, but is a significant, debilitating, potentially even further career-altering athletic injury. C'est acabou. It's over. It is over. That thing, that whole identity is completely finished. Because of course it has. A thing like that. This is why it's important to, like, if you are a fight fan, people will put whatever contribution into their own fandom that they care about, but like, if you don't catch the things that are meaningful happening when they're actually happening, and you want to get it late, or you want it to be, recreated later in some kind of a way. It's basically a fool's errand. You've got to, it's like watching a meteor fall. You got to catch it while it's falling, once it impacts on the ground, now it's over. And that's what it felt like watching that to me, um, in terms of a timeline for a return, certainly not this year. He was talking about April of 2027 as the second fight left on his UFC deal. He's got one more, right? Let's talk about that for a second. So it's July. So let's see. We have August, September, October, November, December, January, February, March, April. I mean, it's potentially possible he could be back by April. I don't know exactly the nature of the injury. Some have said it's meniscus tear. Some have said ACL. We really don't know. Maybe April is still in play. I suspect it's probably not. I suspect it's within maybe the calendar year. Sorry, not the calendar year. 12 months. It's within 12 months. I think that might be possible. But even then, who's to say? It's completely, entirely possible that that he'll be 38 in 2 days. That he'll miss age 38 100%, and you won't see him till 39. And God only knows who he'd even fight at that point. What would even make sense at that point? I don't even know. So I don't want to. This one's a little wishier washier without a full medical diagnosis and more of an understanding of what has happened. But suffice to say that I saw Chael getting shit from people today because he said, I don't think the UFC is going to want to re-sign him after this. And I saw people being like, oh, Chael's an idiot. He doesn't know what he's talking about. I bet he does. I bet Chael is saying that because he's saying that based on conversations he's having with people, but yes, his own judgment about like what the value of this relationship might be long term, but also to that point, what the UFC might be considering. And also just to consider this too, if they were going to re-sign him to a long-term deal with this new money from Paramount Plus, they would have done it already. Conor also wants out of this deal. Like this idea that like UFC is going to go hat in hand to Conor, especially this version of Conor. They already got the very best of Conor. They already got it. They got it. They got every part of it. They got half of his fucking Mayweather purse. They already got it. Like whatever is left, how good is that? It's not that good. This is a very, very, very diminished product at this point. So I don't know why people were on Chael. I think between Conor wanting just to get out because he has more flexibility going to Netflix and boxing Jake Paul and making more money that way, between that and then also UFC just looking at this and being like, dude, what is left of this guy? He literally can't even make it. He barely makes it a minute in the fight because he just can't stay. He's just breaking apart. He's Samuel L. Jackson, like Mr. Glass. I forget the exact which movie was that. Whatever movie that was, from M. Night Shyamalan. I cannot remember the title. That's just where we're at with this. So, like when he comes back at the earliest next year, but it could be late 2027, even 2028. And I don't know who the fuck he would fight. And I absolutely think that there's no way he fights in the UFC after that. I'd be shocked for him to do that. He can't, much less win at this level. I don't even know if he can stay healthy in the sport anymore. With boxing, at least you're kind of rooted to the ground. You have shoes. Again, you can tear your ACL doing that too. I mean, that happens, but the risk factors are certainly lower. I just think like this was as clear a crystal ball look into the future about, I think Conor had already made up his mind and perhaps UFC did as well. But if they didn't, how the hell do you sign a guy like that to a long-term deal? A Netflix 1 or 2 off. Okay. I could see that. A Diaz, Jake Paul boxing extravaganza. Okay. I mean, I could see some two fight deal. Sure. 1 or 2 fight deal. I mean, I didn't realize he's involved with BKFC, but like, a 1 or 2 BKFC fights. All right. You can sort of buy that. But like in the UFC, you can't buy that he can do anything anymore. It's not of any kind of relative importance. He is enfeebled, as I kind of indicated. So I cannot imagine that UFC was exactly pleased with the way last night went because they didn't get much out of it and they charged an enormous gate for it. But, as I've said before, it's a monopoly and, extraction is the name of the game. Let's talk about some of the other losers last night. Max Holloway is certainly not a loser by any stretch of the imagination. He won the fight, technically speaking. He probably got paid a princely sum to do it, and he took no fucking damage. Like, that's pretty great. However, and I love Max. This is not hardcore criticism, but like Max afterwards being like, hey, we could run it back. Let's get this money. I was like, I mean, people probably don't want to hear that right now, right? Because they just paid a shitload of money for nothing. I understand the impulse to say it. Again, I think Max is a great guy, but that didn't quite land for me. But the real one that stands out is Nate Diaz. I think this is a bit of a problem for him. Now, again, depending on what the medical diagnosis is, it may not be that big of a deal. And it's not to say that once Conor extricates himself or this deal expires with the UFC, that they can't find a way to make the fight and that it still wouldn't do big numbers again on Netflix, no matter what. And maybe if it's even a boxing fight, who knows? But the amount of like rehab that Conor's going to have to do and how long that might take and how much that might push back when he can take his second fight, which means it pushes back Nate Diaz's ability to get a fight. And how old is Nate Diaz today? So let's see. Nate Diaz is, excuse me, I'm trying to find this number. Christ on crutches. Here we go. Nate Diaz is 41, but the April 16th of next year, he'll be 42. So he'll at least be 42 by then. Not ideal in terms of the weight that could happen if he ever even is able to physically return to action, which I suspect that he would be, but one never knows. I mean, it adds a layer of uncertainty and delayed timeline that I think they were probably hoping wouldn't happen. So I don't think he comes out of this necessarily feeling a whole lot better about the way that the last fight went against Mike Perry, and then now waiting on McGregor, and then that might even take longer than expected, which at that point, how much does that diminish what's available and make even showing up and looking halfway decent all the more difficult? That probably is not a great thing for him either. I think that to me stands out. But like, honestly, the biggest loser by a million miles, and of course this is no great revelation, but it's worth just sort of discussing the depth of it. It's Conor McGregor. When Ilia Topuria lost at the White House, I had made a point. And by the way, Khamzat losing, Poatan losing, Ilia losing, Conor losing and badly getting injured at the time. Although, you could say the same about Ilia, I suppose. Like, they're on a bit of a run here. Islam fights next month. Can you imagine if Islam loses that fight? Holy shit. What I wanted to say was, though, like when Ilia lost, the thing that stood out to me was how profound and deep the loss itself was. You lost your undefeated record. You lost your belt. You got really, really, really beat up. You lost your standing in pound for pound. I mean, obviously, there's reputational damage that goes along with it. You lost out on the McGregor sweepstakes. You lost. I suppose they could still do that, but they won't at this point. You certainly lost out on the Islam Makhachev sweepstakes. Like, there's a lot that's lost there. That was a really, really bad loss. This is also a pretty bad loss for all the reasons I've kind of already mentioned. But on top of it, the thing that I noticed was Conor McGregor, as I mentioned, still a box office attraction, but he did not have the same pull on the fan base anymore. Now, understanding what I'm talking about, relative to virtually every other fighter, with some exception, I suppose, yes, it's still very high. Relative to what it used to be for himself, it was a pretty clear drop-off. He wasn't getting the pop that other people that he used to get to the same degree. Max was trying to tell the crowd, give it up for Conor, and there was like a smattering of, like they weren't that big on him. They would show him on screen backstage, and there would be some yelling for it, but not like before. The Irish certainly did not travel for him at all this time, and I honestly feel like that was a bit of the glue. Like, a lot of the things that Conor had been running from kind of all came crashing down on him last night. You know, not so much the long arm of the law in that way, but all of the sort of karmic debt he'd been running up, that bill came due last night. And all of the friction that he's had in his life, that bill kind of came due last night. And the hard living he's been doing, that bill kind of came due last night. And his distance from the game and what that's done to his status within it and the celebrity within it, some of that bill came due last night. Like, that was also a real bad loss for him. And now, one more time, he did all this recovery, all that time off, again, according to the New York Times, did all those drugs, and now he has to go right back into rehab and surgery again. That's a bad loss, dude. That's a real bad loss. He didn't get CTE so much from this one, or, beat up in that particular kind of way. But I don't know, folks. Like, the depth of how he lost to me seems unavoidable in kind of inventorying. And once you begin to do that, you're like, wow, this was really quite profound. He had a tweet to that effect, I believe, saying that he's in a dark place, and he's like, I think he described it as quite literally hell. Now, he also has pledged to come back and have another comeback. I mean, yes, I think he probably will, have a literal comeback again. But, what is that going to be? What can that be at this point? Again, relative to his previous highs. I don't know how to answer that question. So that was really, really bad. And, I don't know. I'll leave the last part alone. I think there's definitely people out there dunking on Conor because of what happened outside of the cage, particularly with the Nikita Hand case, which I will say, I think that him having to face that is, rather than having to go to jail, or I suspect if he did both, if he did one, he'd still get the latter rather. But the point I'm trying to make is there's a lot of people dunking on him and really taking great pleasure in his demise and injury. And I don't know if I'm like, oh, I'm, go get injured. I don't know about that. I don't have the least bit of sympathy for him. I don't. Nothing. Zero. Absolutely zero. As I mentioned, one, he's already had enough money to stop doing this, and live extremely comfortably. That's one. And then the other part too is I understand something. Look, all the stuff he's done, how much of it is just the most insane thing you've ever seen. Understand something. So I made a list here. April 5th, 2018. This is the Dolly bus incident. December 9th, 2018. This is the Beacon Hotel in Dublin where the Nikita Hand incident essentially begins, right? And that whole process. March of 2019, he was arrested outside the Fontainebleau for smashing that dude's cell phone. Not the biggest deal, but not getting out of the way of himself. April of 2019, that's when he punched the old dude in the dome piece. October of 2019, a second woman complained in Dublin that McGregor had sexually assaulted her in a car outside of a Dublin pub. He denied it. Nothing ever happened, but he certainly was accused of it. Certainly in September of 2020, out in Corsica, France, he was detained and questioned for 2 days over a complaint of attempted sexual assault and indecent exposure. And then in April of 2021, the prosecutor's office did drop the case eventually, but he still was held up in that particular regard. October of 2021 in Rome, Italy, an Italian DJ said he was attacked by him, broke his nose at a party. He's actually still under investigation. March 2022 in West Dublin, he had 6 driving offenses at that time. By the way, again, not the biggest deal, but sort of like a part of the overall issue. July of 2022 in Ibiza, Spain, an Irish woman alleged McGregor punched her and kicked her aboard his yacht, causing her to jump into the sea. That's a fun little one. And by the way, again, there's previous incidents opposed to that fact of some of these women getting bricks thrown through their door or their car set on fire after the fact. You have the Casilla Center incident, which I know ultimately resulted in the case being withdrawn by the person filing it. We don't know if a settlement was reached or not, but take that for what it is worth. Let's see. What else do we have here? Some of the Dublin riot stuff he's being investigated for in terms of like inciting issues there. He was, of course, in November of 2024, he had found that he had assaulted and raped Nikita Hand. Again, it's a civil jury, not a criminal one. And then the perjury investigation, which I mentioned, is still ongoing. By the way, he's now being sued by Nikita Hand for, quote, malicious abuse of court process over the, quote, entirely concocted, end quote, affidavits. And as of February 2026, the High Court was set to assess damages against the neighbors who, after they failed to respond. So these are the people that claim that they had evidence that, Nikita Hand was somewhere that she claimed she was, and they're like, oh yeah, she was. We heard them, and then they were set to testify, and the whole thing blew up that day, and now they're being investigated for whether or not they were lying the whole time. Like look at the weight of this. Look at the weight of this. This is a very difficult person to have sympathy for. And then to say nothing of, even if none of the legal malfeasance had taken place, just the fact of like how someone had lived, what the reasonable expectation would be athletically to perform, and then to go out there and then have this. Like, I just think that to wrap up on Conor for the moment, I just think that there's a lot of people out there, a lot of fight fans. In my era of MMA, but just hear me out. We got enough pageantry in so many places that I'm not as starved for it, right? And I think what's ended up happening is there's a lot of fight fans now who get in the Apex era who are absolutely starved for high-level magic moments in MMA. And, there's a question about whether you got that with the White House card. Certainly the fights were great and the production was high level, but of course, like, you're willing to just look the other way as they buddy up to a fucking fascist and authoritarian right-leaning guy whose ICE Gestapo thugs are quite literally just a fucking executing people in the street, to say nothing of all the other problems that are happening. But even if you want to look the other way on that one, what would be the argument to look the other way again, or not even have a conversation about what had happened here and to what extent all of that is in play? They're just willing to ignore those things because they don't want to complicate the fun that they have with MMA, which I understand wanting to have the fun with MMA. I've had a lot of fun with MMA, but I just think they're so starved. They're absolutely so starved that they want to blot out everything other than just give me just mainline Mystic Mac right here. Just mainline that shit. They just want to feel that drug. And it just doesn't work that way. It just doesn't work that way. You got to watch it when it happens, as a starting point. And then once this person is in a later stage of their life, and not only just a later stage of their life, a much more complicated stage of their life, and then still trying to mainline it. In order to do that, you have to do this and walk around like this, to me is just, I feel bad for modern fans that have to resort to these kinds of, ostrich-like avoidance tactics. It didn't used to be so complicated, at least not to that same degree.